The blizzard hit Kepler 442b's northern continent with the fury of a dying star. Dr. Sarah Chen watched through the reinforced windows of her research cabin as the alien world's twin moons disappeared behind walls of violet snow. The temperature outside had plummeted to -70 degrees Celsius, and even her military-grade shelter groaned under the assault of winds that could strip flesh from bone. She was alone. The rest of the xenobiology team had evacuated to the orbital station 3 days ago when the weather satellites detected the storm's approach. But Sarah had refused to leave. Her life's work, understanding the apex predators of this world, couldn't wait another 6 months for the next research window. That's when she heard the scratching. At first, Sarah thought it was debris hitting the outer walls, but the sound was too rhythmic, too deliberate. She activated the external cameras and her breath caught in her throat. 20 pairs of luminescent eyes stared back at her through the swirling snow. The Lupus Kepleri, the locals called them ghost wolves, were huddled against her cabin door. These weren't the magnificent hunters she'd observed from safe distances, the creatures that could take down prey 3 times their size with coordinated precision that rivaled Earth's ancient wolf packs. These were desperate, freezing animals on the edge of death. The largest among them, a male with frost gathering on his silvered fur, raised his massive head and met her gaze through the camera. Even through the digital feed, Sarah felt the weight of his intelligence. These creatures possessed neural complexity that rivaled dolphins. Some researchers believed they were on the cusp of true sentience. Every protocol she'd learned screamed at her to stay inside. These predators had killed 2 researchers on Kepler 442b in the past decade. They were dangerous, unpredictable, and bringing them inside was professional suicide, if it didn't result in actual suicide. But Sarah looked at those eyes again. She saw something that transcended species, transcended worlds. She saw the universal language of suffering. "Command is going to kill me," she muttered, overriding the security locks. The door's inner seal hissed open. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the alpha male stepped across the threshold, shaking violet snow from his fur. He was enormous up close, easily 200 kilograms of muscle and fang. The wolves of Kepler 442b had evolved under slightly higher gravity than Earth, making them dense and powerful beyond terrestrial standards. The others followed, filing in with surprising order. Sarah noticed immediately that the alpha had positioned himself between her and the rest of the pack. Whether this was to protect her from them or them from her, she couldn't tell. The wolves spread throughout the main room, curling into tight balls, their bodies steaming as they encountered warmth for the first time in days. Sarah kept her back to the wall, a neural disruptor in her pocket, useless if they all decided to attack, but it provided psychological comfort. The alpha settled near the thermal generator, his massive frame relaxing for the first time since entering. His eyes never left her. "You understand, don't you?" Sarah whispered. "You knew I'd help." The night stretched on. Sarah didn't sleep. She monitored the wolves, taking notes by voice recorder, documenting everything. Several of the younger pack members had frostbite on their paws. She used her medical kit to treat them, approaching slowly, always aware of the alpha's watchful presence. To her amazement, he allowed it, even encouraging the others with low vocalizations that seemed to communicate safety. It was during one of these treatments that Sarah noticed the scars. The alpha bore marks that were clearly not from hunting or territory disputes. They were too precise, too systematic. She'd seen similar patterns in her research data, marks left by the collective's survey drones before human arrival. The realization hit her like a plasma blast. The collective, the insected empire that had claimed this sector before humanity's expansion. They'd been driven back 15 years ago, but they'd left their marks on hundreds of worlds. They'd experimented on local fauna, trying to create biological weapons, attempting to engineer loyalty and aggression. This alpha had survived those experiments. More than that, He'd remembered what artificial intelligence looked like, what shelters meant, what technology represented. And in the face of certain death, he'd made a calculated decision to trust the unknown rather than surrender to the cold. Humanity, fuck yeah, Sarah thought. But then she corrected herself. No, life, fuck yeah. The drive to survive, to adapt, to take insane risks when faced with extinction, that wasn't uniquely human. That was the mark of any species worth its place in the universe. As dawn broke, the storm began to subside. The cabin's environmental sensors registered a temperature rise. The immediate danger had passed. Sarah opened the door, expecting the wolves to bolt for freedom. They didn't move. The alpha stood slowly, his joints popping after the long night. He approached Sarah directly, and she felt her heart hammering. This was the moment that would define everything. Would he return to wild instinct now that safety was assured? Instead, he did something that would change xenobiology forever. He pressed his massive head against her leg, a gesture of trust that transcended species. Then he looked back at his pack and vocalized, a complex series of howls and growls that Sarah's translator AI attempted to parse. The translation was imperfect, but the meaning was clear. Remember this, human. One by one, the wolves approached. Each touched her briefly, a brush of fur, a gentle press of muzzle against hand. It was a ritual, Sarah realized, a way of cementing memory through scent and contact. They were teaching the younger members, encoding this experience into pack knowledge. When the last wolf had completed the ritual, the alpha returned to the door. He paused at the threshold, looking back at Sarah one final time. In his eyes, she saw something that her colleagues would spend decades trying to prove or disprove: recognition, gratitude, and the promise of alliance. Then he was gone, leading his pack into the pink-hued morning of an alien world. Sarah stood in the doorway, watching until they disappeared into the crystalline forests. She looked down at her hands, still trembling with adrenaline, and noticed scratches from treating the wolves' injuries. She should probably sterilize those. Instead, she found herself laughing, a wild, exhausted sound that echoed across the empty landscape. Her communicator buzzed. The orbital team was checking in, preparing for the post-storm landing. Sarah would have to explain everything, face the review boards, possibly lose her position. She didn't care. Because that night, in a cabin on the edge of known space, two species had made first contact, not through language or technology, but through the simple act of one being choosing mercy over fear. The alpha had gambled that humanity's capacity for compassion outweighed its capacity for violence. He'd taken his entire pack's survival and placed it in the hands of a creature he'd never met, from a species that hadn't existed on this world 3 decades ago. And Sarah had proven him right. 3 months later, the research team would discover something extraordinary. The ghost wolves had begun approaching human settlements, not as predators but as something else. They shared hunting knowledge, warned of environmental dangers, guided lost colonists back to safety. The alpha's pack taught others, and those packs taught still more. A partnership was forming, one that hadn't been engineered or forced, but chosen freely by both species. Humanity was spreading across the stars, and they were learning that the universe wasn't something to conquer, it was something to join. Because here's what the collective never understood, what countless civilizations throughout history failed to grasp: power isn't found in dominance. It's found in the moment when you're the strongest thing in the room and choose not to use that strength. It's found when you override every survival instinct and open the door to the unknown because it's the right thing to do. Sarah uploaded her final report as the twin moons rose over Kepler 442b. In it, she included a new classification for Lupus Kepleri, not as fauna, not as lesser intelligence. As partners. The alpha, somewhere in those crystalline forests, raised his head to those same moons and howled. 20 voices joined him, then 200, then 2,000. The sound carried across continents, across comm channels, across the vast distance between worlds. And humanity, still learning its place among the stars, finally began to understand. This wasn't their universe to dominate, it was theirs to share. And that, more than any weapon or technology, was what would carry them to the stars.